centre wheel first. Now when I put the cannon pinion on, the pivot will become invisible, so I'm going to oil that now. I memorised which way up the cannon pinion went. It went with the rounded side down, like that. So there it is. So my next job is to drive that on firmly. Now that needs to be driven on, and I'm going to drive it on using a punch. See if I can find a punch which fits over the arbor. That will do the job. For the sake of the video, I'm going to support it on some brass. There we are. Right, so we're going to tap that down now. It sounded solid. Quick check. A little bit of end shake. Just right. Perfect. Right. Now my next job actually is to put the barrel back together. So we need to give that a good dollop of mainspring grease. So I'm going to use a small screwdriver for that because my oilers aren't very big. So there's a little bit of grease. 3 of those should do it. 2, 3, and a little bit round the centre here. A little bit on the barrel base there. And once again here, a little bit of mainspring grease, not much, just a dollop on just a smear here and here, so that the mainspring can rub against the barrel cover. Alright. The two things go together, and they just twist together. Twist it backwards and then forwards, and it should drop in. There we are. Check that the hook is hooked by turning it a few times. It's very annoying to put a watch together and find that the barrel's not hooked. So that's taken 2 complete revolutions and it's hooked, so that's good. Now I've lubricated the centre wheel before I put the cannon pinion on, but I have to put a little bit of lubrication on the centre arbor because that turns when you set the hands, and since this is steel turning on steel, it's quite important to give it a little bit of lubrication. So this is a conventional watch oil, just a drop on the centre arbor there, and a drop there's a little brass washer in there, put a drop of oil on that so that can soak in. Now we're going to put the train together, and first of all we're going to drop in the 3rd wheel, pinion down. Now we're going to put in the pallets with the pins upwards, and the pallets are put in so that the horn is in line with the balance pivot hole. Now the escape wheel, pinion up, the tail of the pallets banks on the arbor of the escape wheel. Now we have the 4th wheel, which has a long seconds pivot which is going to go down, and that's the train in place. And then when we put the top plate on, first of all line up the 2 holes, the conical pivot holes here, which are going to need some oil. So I'm going to put some conventional watch oil in there. I don't use synthetic watch oil, it evaporates without trace. So I'm going to use 2 drops of conventional watch oil, and you want to make sure the little cup is half full. Now since I've previously cleaned those out, the oil should stay there for a long time. Pin the balance up, I think it's probably a good time to do it. So we're going to thread the balance spring through the curb pins here, and the curb pins are closed, so we thread it through. So look carefully at what I'm doing. There we are. And then it goes into the stud, and I made a mental note of whereabouts the spring was as it came through the stud. Always insert the pin from the same direction as the hairspring. That looks about right. Now we're going to check that the hairspring is flat, so I'm just going to hold it on its side, and the hairspring is indeed flat. Try and show that to the camera. So get the balance in its hole, and the hairspring is running flat and true. And we're ready to drop on the top plate. At this point, I always put a screw temporarily at the rear just to hold everything in place. So I'm just going to drop in a pillar screw here. That will come out again in a minute, but this will simply sit in there and stop everything from moving around. Get it to take, there we are. So now I'm going to try and put the pivots back in their holes. It might help to put one more screw on the other side. I've just dropped one in here as well. So there, 2 screws loosely put in, simply to stop the plate from floating around. Now we're going to tip the whole thing on its side, and we're going to look in from the side and arrange each pivot into its hole. So there's the second, third, fourth, escape. I'm just checking all the pivots are in their holes. So now I'm going to press down, just probably make it snap into place. That's it, the pillars needed forcing down, but before I tighten them fully, just check that the train is free. So we just grab hold of the centre wheel and check that all the wheels follow it when I do this. Just give the train a move, everything is free, and I'll put the last screw in there. They are a fiddle to get together, pin-pallet watches. That's why watchmakers don't clean them unless you really pay them a lot of money. At this point we remove the 2 screws that we used just to hold the plates temporarily. There we are. And now we can put the mainspring back. The small teeth engage the train, the big teeth are for winding purposes. We also have to put back the winding gear. Now the winding gear goes between the plates. I may need to separate them slightly just at this point to get the winding gear in. So there's the winding gear. Like all these things, it's been stripped of its oil, so I'm just going to give it some conventional watch oil. Let's got it in, tighten that up. So I'm just going to sit it back on this lid. Now at this point, check everything is free, give the train an advance, it should start to tick. Yep, it's sort of running. Check that the winding gear is working correctly. The barrel bridge goes on last. At this point I get a large blade, screwdriver blade, try to wind the watch up. So we're going to put some pallet grease on the pallets. This is modern pallet grease, it works very well on pin pallet watches. Now we're going to oil the train. Once again, conventional watch oil. We do oil the pallets, but sparingly, so I'll come back to those in a minute. Now I'm going to check the end shake of the balance, which is a little bit high. If I turn the end pivot or bearing very slightly, it doesn't take much, I can reduce the end shake. That's a bit better. I've just spent a little time centering the hairspring and putting it in beat. If I stop the watch now, it's pretty much self-starting, so that, oh, not quite, but there you are. That's running on about 1 turn of the mainspring. Took a bit of time. You have a space there where you can lubricate the pallets. I've lubricated all the pivots, very lightly lubricated the pallet arbor because that needs lubricating, and I've very lightly lubricated the notch because that's metal on metal. You never lubricate a jawed notch, but you do need to lubricate a pin pallet notch. So there's the action of the escapement. I just touched the pallets, but there you are. It's running quite nicely now. That's running on quite a small amount of mainspring wind. So everything's assembled. I've managed to make it function well without having to rebush this hole, which if you look at it is quite seriously worn. So if I give it a push, you can see how much movement there is in it. But that shows you how forgiving these pin pallet watches are. The rest of them aren't so bad, but that one's quite bad. So now we have to put the dial back on. It's the Motion Workers conventional, the dial washer. So those two tabs are back. These two tabs are ready to be bent slightly. It's always damaging, so very carefully tighten those two up. Check the dial is not loose. No, it's nice and tight, no wiggle. Now we can put the movement back in the case. It's held in by 4 screws. I'm going to make sure the slot in the winding pinion actually is the slot in that winding pinion, so I've got to match the angles. I think they were matched, but that should go together now. The movement is now back in its case. The winding is operating, so we can replace the 4 case screws. Just straighten that out slightly to bring it in line. And then I put the hands on it. Second hand goes on first. Push it from the centre. Check it's clear. It's not, so I'm just going to bend the tip up. Oh, it's very soft. Bend it up just the right amount, but there it is. And put it on anywhere you like, because we're going to straighten that out in a minute. Just press that down evenly on both sides, nice and firm. Once again we bend it up until it clears. It should be parallel with the dial and clearing the second hand. There it is. Now I'm going to turn the hand, and last of all the minute hand, which we also arrange at 12 o'clock. Once again you bend that up until the hands are parallel with the dial and with each other. There we go, that's what you're looking for. Now, regulating it. This is the micro set watch timer. And we're looking for 14,400 beats an hour. Well, that's absolutely spot on. Shan't even touch that. 14,403. Final check, no screws missing. superb balance amplitude. You can see the hairspring is really expanding and breathing a lot there. And the hands are all nicely spaced.